everybody, it's Romania Black, and we are on episode 7 of Vinland Saga Season 2. And man, last episode was really good. Who knew that an episode called We Need a Horse would be really, really great? But I loved it. We were talking in the Discord, and there were some people in the Discord that didn't think it was as good. They thought the episode 4 had a more emotion tied to it, and I would agree with that. I would agree that episode 4 was definitely, Thorfinn and his night terrors, and then Einar nearly strangling him, and them like coming together. It's hard to beat that emotionally, but some people in the Discord were saying that it just seems like it was kind of rushed to get to this point where they're BFFs, and I would say that, yeah, it happening in 2 episodes, I do think I'm okay with it. And I'm happy with it because, one, I want to see Thorfinn happy, damn it. We've gone a whole season and 4 episodes of him being miserable. Seeing him smile at the end of episode 6 was amazing. The best look on him. I'm like, it's fine. But also there is a passage of time that happens that this show doesn't necessarily tell us. It shows us. And so them obviously growing out the goatees. I mean, we went 4, 5, 6 episodes with them just with the stubble, and then we cut to them at the end with the goatee, and it's like, okay, time has passed. We've gotten to this point where they've been together. And plus, you know how this season's going to go. It's going to be a work in progress where everything will seem fine because things are all going their way. But if, the force that Snake and old Gramps were kind of foreshadowing shows up, that may call everything Thorfinn's been dealing with into question, and maybe Einar will have to go back to square one with Thorfinn. We don't know. We don't know what that's going to be like. So it's too soon to say that. I'm not sure. I think the foundation of their friendship is there, and I'm really happy about that because Thorfinn needed a friend. Thorfinn didn't have a friend. And so for him to have Einar is everything. And it warms my heart. And I'm like, yes, Thorfinn, I just want to see you happy, dude. And if Einar, our bumbling farmer, is the person to do that for you, right on, right? I do have a few comments before we tie into this episode, though. Sack talked about how, we talked about this in the Discord, that Thorfinn's getting older, and I felt like the parent watching their kid grow up and, leave the nest. But Sack brought up a good point. They were like, we're looking at this all the wrong way. Thorfinn is getting older, but he's also getting cuter. And I was like, oh, he is of age now, so we can ship and simp over him, and it's fine. It's not like a 14-year-old kid. So yeah, that is true. Maybe I'm going about this the wrong way. Maybe I've been looking at it through the wrong lens. Glass half full, right? So yeah, I do think Thorfinn's cute. I usually hate facial hair on guys. I'm not attracted to that at all. But Thorfinn and Einar, they make it work. I've seen worse. They make it work. It really works in the OP. The OP looks great. In the episode, I'm like, I can't say I won't get used to it. It's fine. I'm okay with it. It's not a full-on beard. It's okay. It's restrained. And then Alexander Q brought up a really cool point about Canute. Talking about Canute maybe is favored by the people more than the soldiers, because we talked about in episode 5 that Canute's big struggle, it seems that now he's taken the crown. I'm not so sure the soldiers are really on board with Canute because of the ways he went to get the crown. So it's like, But it could be one of those things where he's supported by the people, so everybody kind of keeps their mouth shut because you don't want a big revolt. You want to unite and conquer, not divide, right? And it's good to know that Harold seems to be back in Denmark. Harold's like, have fun in England. I'm a rule over here. That seems to be the case as far as we know right now, which I'm a little bit worried about that because I can see Harold being like, I've got an army. I kind of want to take my kingdom back, little bro. So I don't know how that's going to fare out. But also there's the question Alexander Q pointed out. We debated a little bit about this of, will Thorfinn find out that Floki's the one that killed Thors? I don't want him to, only because we talked about this back in season 1 with episode 24. In episode 24, a part of me was like, oh, Askeladd, tell Thorfinn about Thors. And several people point out in the comments, and after reading it, I was like, okay, yeah, I agree with that. That had Thorfinn learned about Floki from Askeladd, he wouldn't have been able to stop seeking revenge. It would have kept the cycle going. He would have gone from chasing Askeladd the rest of his life to chasing Floki the rest of his life, and it probably would have ended the same way, or worse, it would have gotten Thorfinn or people around him hurt. So I feel like Askeladd did not tell him only because he wanted the cycle of revenge to stop for him to not go after Floki and not treat him the same way he had Askeladd. Now, the question is, Thorfinn's done some growing up, and he's changing and maybe realizing and trying to figure out what he's seeking in life, and maybe that it's not revenge. So the question is, will he eventually find out about Floki? I'm kind of torn. Part of me says no, that they've moved on from that plot point. And the biggest headcanon I have right now is I think he will never know that Floki killed Thor's, but he may inadvertently be the cause of Floki's death. That's my headcanon. I feel like Thorfinn is never going to find out that it was Floki that ordered the kill on Thor's, but inadvertently he's going to be responsible for Floki dying, and it's going to be like a cosmic karma, right? It's just going to be the stars realigning and all is well in the world sort of situation. Although, two other things could happen. One, he could find out about Floki and decide to go take revenge, completely defeating the point of Askeladd not telling him, which I don't think it's going to be that. Or he could find out about Floki killing Thor's and not take revenge and realize there's something else to life that he wants better or wants more. So the former is my headcanon, where I think that he's not going to find out, but it's just going to be cosmic karma that lets Floki get killed by Thorfinn's hand or by a means that Thorfinn was influencing. But we'll see. Who knows? So I've poured myself some juice and I'm ready to dive in, y'all, and see what this episode has in store. So I have muted my Discord channel for Vinland Saga today. I've muted it. I was like, I'm not going to touch it. Not going to touch it. No, sirree, Bob. No, sir, not going to touch it. Just going to go right into it. So, and then I'll get on the channel later after I'm done with this discussion. So I've been a good girl off social media today because I wanted to be surprised with whatever this episode has in store. So let's find out, shall we? We're going to watch episode 7 of Vinland Saga, season 2. And we're going to do that here in 3, 2, 1, and let's go. Well, just when you think, you're like, oh, everything's going to be fine. It's all going to work out. No, Arnheid is, that is not a good situation. My heart just like dropped for Einar. I was like, oh no, this is not going to go down good. Not at all, right? Not at all. Nope, that's not going to end well. I'm like, well, Einar, at least you have a type. At least you still have Thorfinn to fall back on. Because, yeah, I don't see things ending well for Arnheid at all. No, because this is not good, right? Ah, damn it. I figured that she was, not just serving the mistress, but was also a mistress herself. Even though she's a slave, she's kind of being forced against her will to it. But to be fair, I don't know. Here's the thing. Do I think that Arnheid and Kettle have had sex? Probably, but do I think that they go at it every night? I don't think so. I think she's more there for moral support for him. He needs someone to talk to, and she's like, okay, I guess I can do this. And luckily for her, he's not an asshole. He's a nice guy, and she's like, well, things could be worse. But the fact that he's like, don't ever leave me, and she's like, how can I be with Einar when I'm with you? That's like the whole problem. She wants to be with Einar, I feel, and Einar is head over heels for her. But it's not going to work because unless he dies, unless Kettle dies, he's not going to let her go. And I'm like, oh, that's so bad. But so yeah, lots of stuff happened. Why is my voice so squeaky? Lots of stuff happens in this episode. I've been getting on Twitter and kind of laughing hysterically. There's a bunch of bros that are like, this season's the most boring ever. This season, nothing happens. I'm like, do you read books, sirs? Like, you have to develop character and you have to develop theme. And I'm sorry that we went through an entire season of bloodshed and now we're setting up the idea of bloodshed is bad. So it's the same type of people. I don't know. I feel it's the same type of complaints with Attack on Titan. Attack on Titan is very much an anti-war statement. I mean, Isayama is basically showing how horrific war is and terrifying. And the same people that I think are complaining about Vinland Saga being boring are the people that that think Aaron's genocide is a good idea. So I'm like, just like want to scream into the Swiss Alps with my "Don't you understand" theme? Don't you get that both Isayama and the creator of this series are anti-war? They don't want to glamorize it. It's supposed to be bad. But I do understand, to play devil's advocate, I do understand that a lot of the people that say, because I'm sure that one of the comments about this episode, I can already see it now, they're gonna be like, this is so boring, nothing's happening. I'm like, they're setting up the characters. It's a 24 episode season. You've got plenty of time for blood. We've spent a whole season with blood and battle. I'm like, if you guys like watching the same shtick over again, go watch Fast and Furious. Like, if that is your shtick, just get off of here and go watch Fast and Furious, and you'll get the same thing over and over again, just with a different bow around it. But what I like that this season is doing is that it is taking characters. Everybody complained that I was talking to in the YouTube comments. Everybody was complaining in the last season about how Thorfinn didn't have any character development. They're like, he has no character development. We've had no time for that. Well, now we're getting it. He's learning things. We're developing it. We're going back to these thematic elements the mangaka wants us to pay attention to. Einar and him and their relationship, they have to develop. If it was so quick and ready, everybody'd be complaining about it. So I'm just like, people gonna bitch no matter what. It's so annoying. I'm just like, go watch something else if you're bored with this and quit complaining. Like, you have the ability to change the channel, sirs and madams. I never hear any girls on Twitter complain about this show. But then again, I don't know a lot of women watching Vinland Saga, so they should be for Snake. Except for Snake. But yeah, so sorry for ranting about that, but it frustrates me so much because I actually am loving this season. I'm loving all this development. I know that the battles are coming. I know the bloodshed is coming too, but it's almost like the calm before the storm. I want to savor it and enjoy these little moments of peace before things go to hell in a handbasket. And I'm just so happy that Mappa stuck to their guns and animated these episodes and took their time with pacing. Because if you're a manga reader, and I don't read the manga for Vinland Saga, but if you are a manga reader, nothing hurts more than when an animation studio sacrifices plot for pacing. And it's so heartbreaking, right? And I'll use an example. I'll use Haikyuu as an example. The very last season of Haikyuu that happened, I watched it and reacted to it on this channel. And they basically, just to put it in perspective, they had adapted, in the first season, they had adapted 40 chapters. And the second season, they adapted 40 chapters. In the third season, it was a shorter season, they adapted 20 chapters. The fourth season was the same amount of episodes as the first and second season, and they adapted 80 chapters into that. They cut out so much stuff. They rushed through things. And granted, if you were anime only, you're probably like, wow, this is so fast paced. But if you're a manga reader, you're like, but all this important stuff that's really integral to the story, you cut it, and so now we can't enjoy it, and it just takes away from the overall experience. And people complained about season 4, saying that there was stuff with the plot that seemed rushed, and we're like, yes, they rushed through it, right? And now they want to just make 2 movies, and I'm not going to talk about Haikyuu anymore. But my point is, I feel like as a manga reader of Vinland Saga, the people that have read the manga are probably really happy with this season because they know what's to come, and they're probably happy that this is taking its time to set stuff up. And the anime only people, the knee-jerk reaction is, oh, the tone is different than season 1, so it's bad. No, the tone can be different. You just have to be patient with it. This series has always been a slow burn. It's never been like a My Hero Academia, like a Jujutsu Kaisen, where it's just battles 24/7. It's never been like that. So I don't know where all the hate necessarily comes from, except people just aren't patient and maybe lack the ability to be patient. But if that's the case, go watch something else and then just binge this when you're done. That's all I can say. But I laugh really hard at some people on Twitter that are just like, nee, 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 nee. I'm like, what do you expect? So that's my rant. That's my rant. It's not even really a rant. It's just me finding it funny. But we need to talk about this episode. And God, I went on for like 6 minutes. So yeah, Snake, our man Snake, talking about finding the thieves and the footprints. He's like, why did this happen while the master's gone? And he's like, we'll track him and find him. He's like, do they think we don't know? And I feel like Snake is wondering. I wondered if Snake realized they were kids based on the footprints, if he was thinking about it. Because when we first start the episode and they said they stole a bag of flour and some dried meat, I'm like, that's not really much of anything. And then when you find out that they're kids, it's like, oh, okay, that makes a lot more sense. That's all it could carry. But Snake's point is, if they start now stealing something, they're going to keep coming back for more, and it's going to add up over time, which he's not wrong. So I want to put Snake up here first, our boy Snake, and kind of talk about him as I pass this Huckleberry. Kind of talk about this with him. But Snake's whole deal is Snake is capable of being a leader. And he's kind of a middleman, right? And what I mean by that is that he's kind of in the middle of Kettle and Thorgil. Thorgil is just like, let's chop off their arms, do this the Viking way. And he's like hardcore into the battle. And then Kettle wants nothing to do with that. He wants to avoid violence at all costs. And Snake is kind of this middle ground, right? I feel like Thorgil is more like Thorkell. The Thors connecting. Kettle is more like Thor's, and I feel like Snake is like Askeladd. Like there's this a time and place for everything is how I feel Snake is. He's like, yes, we do need to use violence sometimes, but not all the time. So he's like in that middle ground, right? I feel like he knows to use violence and when to not use violence. That's kind of his stick. And you can tell, he looks at those kids and that girl at one point, and you can tell he hates it. Like, the look on his face, he's like, he doesn't want to do this, but he knows it's part of the system, and he knows that to save face for Kettle and for his people in the village, that's what's got to be done. So he very much has this mentality of, he's not happy about it, but is willing to do the job. He's willing to get the job done. He may not be happy about it, but he's going to do it because it's a necessity. It is an evil, a necessary evil, right, is what needs to happen. But he's aware of the consequences of it and how it affects people, right? Bless his heart, Einar. Einar is the absolute sweetest. He is a damn cinnamon bun. And you could tell she likes him. And he's just is so head over heels for her, which granted, she's really pretty. But like, we need to just talk real quick about this scene at the well. Like, he's such a bumbling little goofball, but he's so sweet. And she's just like, you can tell she's enamored with him. Thorfinn could not care less. I am 100% on the bandwagon that Thorfinn is just asexual, not attracted to women at all, doesn't really even notice they exist. And Einar's like, well, yeah, hi. For the record, I am for Arnheid and Einar. My heart breaks at the end of this episode because I realize in this moment that it's not likely going to happen unless Kettle dies. Because I don't think Kettle's going to give her up. Even if he knows Einar's a good man, I don't think Kettle's going to give her up. So my theory is it's either going to be one of three things, right? So with Arnheid, let me get this right. With Arnheid, I think that we've got some different scenarios that could happen. One is that Kettle dies for her to be with Einar, but that's a problem because if he dies, she's a slave. She doesn't instantly get free if he dies. Someone is likely to buy her and take her away. So if he dies, Einar may think he's getting with Arnheid, but then she's taken away. Because that mistress ain't keeping her around. Oh, hell no. So then that's one scenario. The other scenario is that, this is the least likely. The least likely would be with Kettle would let Einar be with her. Because Einar brings up with Thorfinn, he's like, I know we can buy back our freedom, but what about Arnheid? And Thorfinn's like, I don't know. Thorfinn seems to kind of read the writing on the wall, but he doesn't want to tell his bro friend. He doesn't want to tell his BFF, be like, dude, I don't think they're just going to let her go. I think she's with him for a reason. Gah. So, this is the least likely is that Kettle just lets her go or lets Einar, when he buys his freedom, he buys hers. I felt like that's what Einar was getting at. He was like, well, if we buy our freedom, could I buy hers? I figured that's what he was getting at with Thorfinn. So, I don't know. I don't think that will happen. Another option is that Einar Einar leaves with Thorfinn and lets her go. And just leaves her. That would be the saddest, is if he just left. Him and Thorfinn got out of there. If something happens, they foreshadowed in the last episode that there could be a chance that some force comes into the village and they're not prepared to handle them. And if during the chaos, Einar and Thorfinn get out, my biggest fear, my headcanon-y fear, because it's Vinland Saga, things have been going real nice. Things have been cutesy and fun, and I'm just waiting for the shoe to drop and Vinland Saga to be like, oh yeah, remember those cool fun times that you had for like half the season? Remember how we're going to make up for it by making the most tragic things happen? And I'm like, no. So my fear is that either Einar and Thorfinn are going to have to leave the village, leave Kettle's farm without her, or the worst case scenario is that she dies and then Einar and Thorfinn have to leave. That's the worst case scenario, is that she dies and they have to leave. My theory, up until we saw her with Kettle, my theory was going to be, I was like, oh, and that's kind of what the episode lulls you into this false sense of security. I'm like, oh, Einar will buy Arnheid's freedom. That's what I thought. As we saw Thorfinn, like, giving them a chance to talk. And Thorfinn, I don't think Thorfinn was necessarily being considerate and giving Einar this moment alone with Arnheid. I literally think Thorfinn was just bored in the moment and was like, I'm not sticking around because I'm clearly not part of this conversation, so I'm going to leave. And Arnheid and Einar just assumed Thorfinn was being considerate, right? But at this point in the episode, I was thinking that, okay, well, this is setting up that Arnheid and Einar will be together. And then when Thorfinn leaves the village, he's going to leave Einar there with her, and Thorfinn's going to go on his merry way, which would be really sad. I would hate it because I really love the dynamic Einar and Thorfinn have developed, and I don't want to see Thorfinn by himself. But at first I thought, okay, well, this is what the episode's setting up. This is going to be Einar's way to stay with Arnheid, and then Thorfinn's going to leave. And by the end of this episode, I'm like, no, Einar's either leaving with Thorfinn without Arnheid, whether she lives or dies, or they're going to try, or Kettle's going to have to die for her to be with him, and then it's not going to work out either way. Long story short, this scenario is not going to play out well, and I don't think it's going to have a happy ending, and my soul is already being crushed. So that was my whole thought with it, right? But I just love that Einar, he's just like, he's so, and then Thorfinn just pops up on the other side of the well, like, I've been here the whole time. And Einar, he has such an optimistic, idealistic look. He's like, they're just paying us back. And she's like, we're slaves. Nobody pays us back. She's like, don't you get that? And he's like, oh, right. Like, he forgets they're slaves. Like, he just forgets. He's like, oh, yeah. And he's just like, now that you mention it, I guess you're right. He's such an airhead. I just love Thorfinn being like, Thorfinn's like, he says, Thorfinn he's like, I can't right now, Einar. Maybe he does get what Einar is trying to do and decides to help him. I don't know. I just love that Thorfinn is casually just an observer. He's not interested in Arnheid at all. Right? And she just laughs at him because he's just so kind. She's like, you're a good person. You just don't realize it yourself. Aww. And of course, he's just like so blushy about it. Bless his heart. And Thorfinn, maybe Thorfinn does realize, now that I'm watching the episode again, maybe Thorfinn does realize that they're having a moment. Maybe. I mean, Thorfinn was around when his sister was a little bit older and had all the guys running after her, so maybe he remembers that. I don't know. Maybe he remembers that with Ylva. I definitely got Olmar and Olmar relating to Thorfinn and Ylva relating to Thorgil, because and what I mean by that is that Thorgil has a very abrasive, like gung-ho personality and has like the means to back it. Ylva, she was like a gung-ho woman that was like, I'm strong, I can handle myself, kind of like Thorgil. And then Olmar and Thorfinn were both wanting to prove themselves. They wanted to both leave home, join the army, and prove themselves that they were strong like their big sibling. That's the connection, right? And there's such a connection between Thor's and Kettle that it's not even funny, right? Except I think that it goes even beyond with Kettle, so we'll get into that. But yeah, I like that Einar's like, was he trying to be considerate? And it's like, well, maybe, or maybe he's just bored with you. It's like, he's a good guy. He just doesn't talk much. And she's like, I know. Like, she kind of knows that Thorfinn's a good character, right? Man, that slap that girl gets, though. Arnheid, that slap that mistress does to her. And at first I was like, why are you being this way? But then, when you're like, the mistress knows that Kettle is with Arnheid instead of her. I hope that woman was pretty when she was younger, but she just looks like Olmar with a wig. And then, God... Einar, I can't with Einar being like, yahoo, like, she called me a good person, like, he's just doing his little jig. Bless him. Bless his bones. He's the most precious. And this woman's like, the master's returning, go get stuff ready. And now the mistress says, I suppose an enslaved man would be a good match for an enslaved woman. And it's such a bitch move to say that to her. And the mistress, my fear is that the mistress is going to try to get Arnheid in trouble. I feel like the mistress, she knows that Arnheid was flirting with Einar. My fear is the mistress is going to get mad that Kettle is keeping her around, is sleeping with her, and is going to try to get Arnheid in trouble by telling Kettle or spreading the word around the village that she's a whore, and she's trying to, like, two-timing on Einar, when she hasn't done anything to Einar. She likes Einar, but... It's like the worst concoction. You have Arnheid, who's just trying to do what she does, but she likes Einar. And then you have the mistress, who's pissed off at Arnheid for being there and wants her gone. You have Kettle, who doesn't want her to ever leave because she's like his only source of comfort. He can only talk to her, and she doesn't talk back to him because she's a slave. And then you have Einar, who has the biggest heart, but is kind of a himbo and is probably going to get into trouble if somebody mentions something about her. So it's like, it's just this perfect storm of bad things that are going to happen. And I just have a feeling the mangaka is not going to let this story end happily. And I kind of hate it already. Right? But we go to them growing the wheat. And Thorfinn, bless his heart, Thorfinn doesn't know what to do. He's never grown wheat before. He doesn't know how things work. And he asks, like, he says it looks so feeble. He's like, these things become bread. He's like, they look so weak and fragile. And I think that's kind of a cool, again, we talk about something with symbolism throughout. And kind of, we'll do the symbolism here. I was going to make like a note with Kettle and Thorgil, but we'll put it down here. But yeah, as far as the symbolism goes, the idea of something weak growing to be something strong and important, right? We talked in the last episode or two ago about this concept in nature that only the strong survive, right? And that humanity is kind of the exception to that rule, and that sometimes the weak live longer than the strong. Circumstances happen. But I also feel like it's kind of cool that this episode takes a moment to say that may be true of animals, but in nature, oftentimes really fragile, delicate things can transform into very important and strong things as well. So I think that's kind of cool. It's like showing Thorfinn that you may be in this weak position now, but that doesn't mean you may be weak now, Thorfinn, but you too can become a loaf of bread, right? You can become that strong as well. You gotta just be tended to in the proper way, maintained the proper way, and nurtured to the point where you can grow to do that. Right? And maybe Einar can help tend your garden. However you want to take that metaphor. First horses and now gardens. Mm-hmm. I will say, they are animated better this episode with the goatees. I feel like the Mappa animators were like, if we've got to do this, we got to do this. They look a lot better with them. It also makes them look so much older, right? It makes Thorfinn and Einar look so much older, even though they're like in their early 20s. It's like, oh my God. And he's like, it's amazing. I just love Farmer Thorfinn. Farmer Thorfinn smiling and being happy. Yes, please. That's all I need. I'm not asking for much. That's so sweet. I love that. It's great. Him just appreciating. He's like, we'll grow and sell and we'll grow and sell. It may take years, but we've taken our first step towards freedom. I'm glad that Einar acknowledges this, because what I've been fearful of is that Einar hasn't grasped, because he can be a little aloof. And I was afraid that Einar hadn't grasped the concept that this was going to take time, and he thought that he was just going to get his freedom like that. But no, Einar has come to terms with the fact that this is going to take a while, but we got nothing else to do, so we might as well just stay here and grow crops and just make our land bigger and let it happen faster, or as fast as we can. And Thorfinn seems on board with that. He's like, okay, He's like, sure thing. And then Thorfinn just seems happy about it. And he says, we can eventually buy our freedom by farming, but could I ask Arnheid how she gets her freedom? And I'm like, I was like, is that something you ask a lady? Like, how are you getting your freedom? She'd probably have the answer of, I'm not. Because that's not how this works, right? Yeah, I feel like if you're sold into like sex trafficking in this world, you're not just getting your freedom. That's the hard truth of it, right? So then, okay, there's this part about praying. The part about praying and Einar praying to anyone, right? And Thorfinn's never done this. He's like, I don't know what you're doing. And so he's just like, make them ripen and grow. And he's just like praying to everything and everywhere. And Thorfinn's like, I love Thorfinn's expression. It's the youngest we've seen Thorfinn look in like a season, where Thorfinn's like, what? His big wide eyes. In that moment, Thorfinn looks like a kid again, where he's like, what are you doing? Like, he's so weirded out. Like, I've dealt with an entire season of Thorfinn having the same downtrodden, sour expression. All you haters, I have had 7 episodes of him with varied expressions and emotion, damn it. I'm enjoying myself. Because, yeah, he just looks like such a kid again. He's like, what is happening? And I love that, it's like where he's like rolling on the ground. I love that Einar grabs Thorfinn so seriously. He's like, hey, I'm gonna get a picture of that. He's like, hey, get down here too. God, you can make a lot of sexual innuendos out of this episode if you wanted to. But yeah, he's like, join me. And Thorfinn's like, what? No. I love that. And Thorfinn, he goes, who am I supposed to pray to? He's like, I don't know. I love he's so earnest in that moment. He also looks a little bit like Askeladd in that moment, where he's like, who am I supposed to pray to? He looks a little bit like Askeladd or Thorgil, and he says, anyone. I love that Einar's like, we're desperate, sir. Yahweh, Freya, pray to everyone and everything. Einar's like, whatever makes it work. That's what we're going to do. And he's like, we got to go. We're desperate, sir. So he's like, get down here. We'll pray extra hard to make up for it. And I love that Thorfinn's not really on board with it. He doesn't really get the whole praying aspect. He doesn't really see it as something beneficial. He doesn't understand religion. He's like, But Einar is very passionate about it, or he's pseudo-passionate. And so Thorfinn's like, I'll play. I'll just join you if it'll make you feel better. And he's like, put your hands together and pray with me. He's like, I'll help out. And I love Thorfinn's like, what do I do with my hands? Like, make the crops grow. I love this. I love this little moment where he's like, make the crop. They're just yelling. And again, it's like bro bonding moment. It's bro. He's like, nothing's more embarrassing than doing it half-assed. I love that it's the most like perfect little bonding moment between the two of them. I love that. That's really sweet. It's such a good scene. It's really nice. I like it a lot. So then we have Thorgil coming up. And Thorgil looks a lot like Kettle. And now that we've seen the mistress, Olmar looks exactly like his mom. How Kettle ended up with her is beyond me. And so Thorgil wants his brother to go into battle. But Kettle does not. Kettle does not want Olmar to see battle. Probably because he knows that Olmar is not like Thorgil and will probably die. So let's talk about Kettle. Talk about Kettle in this moment. Kettle has the nickname Iron Fist. Right? He has that nickname. He despises it. And he says that it's all a lie. That it's not true. I wonder when they were talking about the reputation he had. I'm like, is that really his reputation or is that something fabricated? And Kettle says it's fabricated. Now, whether it is, it seems like it could have been exaggerated over time. Like maybe Kettle was a warrior. He did fight, but then as soon as he got the chance to get away, he was like, nope. And maybe word just got around and spread about him and he just got that reputation, right? But Thorgil believes it. That's the crazy thing. Is that Thorgil, he buys all in. And it's kind of funny the difference between Thorgil and Olmar is really interesting because you have, I'll put Thorgil over here. You have Thorgil and you have Olmar. Olmar like chided his dad and was complaining that he just couldn't wait to get away from him. Thorgil respects his dad because of the reputation that he has, right? And Olmar has chided his dad because he's seen how he actually is, right? And Thorgil apparently has, like, he has strength in battle. And then Olmar, he wants to join. I'm kind of with Kettle, though. I think if Olmar joins, I don't think it's going to be good. I think he'll die. I don't think he's not a monster. He's not horrifying as Thorgil is. Right? And then they talk about Canute, that he's the king, that war has changed him. So I'm very excited to see, like, the idea of, and I'll get this back up here, this concept of we've had Thorfinn go from being a warrior to developing into, like, a proper human being. And then with Canute, he started out as this, like, human that has become this warrior. It's like they both flip-flopped. And what's funny is at the start of the story, Canute was referred to as a baby. They're like, oh, he's just a princely little baby in swaddling clothes. And now he's this warrior king. Whereas Thorfinn started out as this, like, feral warrior beast. And now he's an overgrown baby. So they've literally gone in the opposite directions. They both started from different angles and have gone to where each other started at. It's kind of amazing. But yeah, Thorgil thinks that he's changed a lot in this war and he's part of his army. He says that they're calling him, he calls himself king. He's a proper general. So I guess he says he's calling himself king, but I don't know how that works. Why not send Olmar to the battlefield and see how he fares? And Kettle's like, no, your brother's not like that. So we see Snake. And oh my God, Snake and Thorgil. He's like, when'd you get back? Oh, 5 or 6 days ago, brah. Like, just these two. Of course they'd be bros. Of course they would be, right? It very much, Snake has an Askeladd vibe, and I would say that Thorgil's like a cross between Bjorn and Thorgil, right? He just has that kind of, like, his personality seems a cross between Bjorn and Thorgil, right? But these bros, like, fist pump, bro. Oh, yeah. Like, of course they are. Right? Why should we be surprised? I'm just taking a picture of them. Best bros, right? The bromance in this series is epic. And so he's like, oh yeah, we've got these kids that are thieves. The one kid, though, he looks like a cross between Bjorn and Thorfinn. Like, he just has that look in his eyes, like Thorfinn, that just feral look, right? And he just wants his sister to be protected. And so we see the shackles that are in the OP. And we see that that he's wearing them while they're eating and it's kind of the big thing here is, like, the feast happening with Kettle while the kids are starving. Again, you've got the idea these kids are starving and that's why they were stealing food. And then there's this big feast with all this meats and stuff just laid out for Thorgil for his return visit, right? It's just the irony of it, right? And so there's Arnheid putting all the meat and stuff out, and Olmar's hearing about Thorgil's battle stories and getting kind of freaked out. And then he says, oh yeah, after the battle, you enjoy plundering the spoils. And then guys will kill each other all the time over women they can sell. And the thing about it is that Canute hated all that. Canute didn't want all that. So I guess it's still going on even while Canute is in charge. Or it's happening behind his back. Or Thorgil's just saying that it happens when it's not. So that's his story from war, right? And then Olmar's like, I want to go to battle. And he's like, that's my little brother. And Kettle is terrified of his son. Because he pulls out the necklace of ears. He's like, my son really is a monster. He has that necklace of all the Englishmen's ears. And so he talks about Kettle the Iron Fist. His weapon would shatter under his own strength. And they make him just look like such a monster. Saying he'd fight the rest barehanded on the battlefield. He'd accomplish more than anyone fighting like that. And Thorgil genuinely believes it. And he's like, our dad. Now the question is, he says it's all a lie, but Was Kettle somewhat successful in battle, and he's just trying to like Thor's get away from it and be like, that's not really me, it's not like they say it was, no, and he's trying to deny it. I figured that was the case, was he just wanted to deny that, he wanted to move on from it. So now it makes sense why Spherical is so kind of upset with Kettle, because Spherical's like, you're a warrior, your son is a warrior, you should be a warrior like your bloodline, and Kettle's like, I don't want that. Kettle's like, no, he's anti-violence. He doesn't like the system. And he kind of, now the farm and the slaves are making more sense. He's like, well, if I need to go with society, then I'll just have people work on my farm, but they can work for me and they don't have to die. We'll just do that, right? That'll solve the problem, right? And it doesn't necessarily, because it leads to situations like with Arnheid that are so problematic. But Omar, he's so amazed that his dad was a veteran. And then he's like, if the great Iron Fist Kettle commands it. And the thing about it is that Kettle kind of goes along with the lie because he's terrified of his own son, and he knows this is the only way his son will listen to him, is if he just has that reputation behind him. I wonder if he didn't pay the soldiers to tell. I wonder if he didn't pay to have the rumor spread about the Iron Fist story so that people would leave his family alone. I wonder if they didn't just like pay to spread that rumor around, but it's not actually true. Could be. And then Snake's like, look, can you take care of these kids? Because I ain't running no daycare here. Like, Snake's like, I got ladies to see and your grandpa to see as well. I was going to say, I got ladies to see and your grandpa to screw, but no. I got ladies to see and your grandpa to stew with. I love when the Discord people are like, you can ship anyone with anything. And I'm like, you are absolutely right. So then, yeah, like, and he's in this judgment chair. And Kettle is so gentle. He's like, don't yell at them. They can't speak because they're frightened. Pater, I'm surprised Pater gets away with all that he does in this episode. Pater, like, gives this detailed account of how they can reintegrate into society and be fine. Being like, oh, let the kids work for you to pay off the debt and all of this. Like, Pater has a surprising amount of influence, but I get now why Kettle keeps him around, because he's kind of that middleman that can give ideas to Kettle, that Kettle can be like, oh yes, good idea that you had, not me, but you, right? And kind of deter away any blame from the ideas being his. But Pater's also like, yeah, no, you do need to punish them though. Like, otherwise they're going to keep stealing, or it's going to set a bad precedent and people are going to start stealing from your farm and knowing that you're just going to let them work to get out of it. And so those poor kids, where Surrey is like, our dad left and he didn't come back, and Thorgil's like, yeah, he's probably dead. I'm like, that's so cruel. Like, just telling the kid right off the bat that their dad is probably like long gone. And Kettle, you can just tell that he's like kind of heartbroken for these kids. Like, he's about to cry. Kettle is a very sweet and empathetic, like, gentle person. His sons are just not like him, right? It's sad. I like the mistress is like, what's the matter, honey? And he's like, I just got something in my eyes. And they're like, we need to stop them from stealing anymore. And so then he's like, well, Snake, you didn't threaten them to confess, did you? And he's like, of course not. And then we cut to him like emptying the sand from the bag and saying, I'll wait till the bag is empty and then I'll beat whoever's on the bottom of it. And they're like, oh my God. And yeah, they have like a baby and a kid. And Kettle's like, that is threatening them. And he's like, I don't know. It was just maybe. But yeah, Thorgil's plan is just to cut off his arm. And then he says, oh, you don't want to cut off your sister's arm? You'll take both your arms off? And I do agree with Pater. Pater, like Snake, is the middleman. Snake can't offer up the middleman's suggestion because it would make him look weaker as a battle man, right? As a mercenary that's a hired gun, pretty much. But Pater, he can kind of speak as the middleman because he's not Kettle, but he's also not like on the kid side either. He offers the middle ground. He's like, okay, let's not cut off his arms. Then he's useless to society and serves no purpose. So instead, like Kettle said, we'll make him work to pay the money back, but he's going to need a beating so that he knows not to do it again. And that's the compromise that they come up with. That's the way they do it. So they're like, they agree to let him have the beating. And Kettle's like, well, can't we just let them pay off their debt? And they're like, no. And they take the blade off the axe and it's just the handle. They're like, no, we need to make sure that people know that this isn't going to be good. And that shot of Snake, oh my gosh, that shot of Snake when it pans up to him in the shadows with the stick. Mappa has just decided, they're like, Snake's our man, we're going to animate and make the hottest. That's just how it's going to go. But that is such a good shot of him. He has some great shots. The animation in this episode is fantastic. Like the shots of Snake here and when the shadows are on his face, it's a very Ask Lad stance, and I like it. And Kettle kind of reminds me of, I said Thor's. He's like Thor's, but he's also this mix of Thor's and Ragnar in this moment too, right? He's a mix between Thor's and Ragnar. And it's like he has Thor's ideals about nonviolence, but then he's like emotional like Ragnar. Like Thor's, even when Thor's was talking about how we shouldn't do this and that, and we should be, at peace, he never was emotional like Kettle is, but Ragnar would get emotional like that, especially around Canute. So he's kind of like a cross between them. It's fascinating. And he says 5, but then he's like, no, 10 strokes. Just make it an even 10. And then the moment the boy, he says, bite down hard, boy. And the moment the boy is like, please don't hit my sister. I'll take 20. He says 20, hit me 20 times. And that shot that cuts back, he's like, just please don't hit my sister. And that shot back to Snake, oh, that shot. Oh my God. That look where Snake's like, okay, kid, that's gonna hurt, but okay. Like you almost feel like Snake has been in that boy's position. Like Snake knows exactly what that boy is going through. And he knows how that feels to get beaten 20 times. Maybe Snake had a sibling. Maybe he took the extra beatings for someone else. But in that moment with that expression, it's like Snake knows exactly what that boy is thinking and what he feels and is like, okay, kid, you're doing this. Now, when Thorgil took the bat away to swing, when Thorgil did it, I was like, you're going to kill that kid. Like he does one swing and it's enough. And at that point, Kettle's like, no, I'm going to do it. Oh. And then, of course, Thorgil asks where he went during the feast, and Olmar's like, oh, he went to bed already. He's like, oh, he's so old. And then we cut back to him that he did not go to bed. I thought he'd be crying in bed. I thought that Kettle would be crying because he nearly cried outside in front of everybody else. I thought Kettle would be crying, but instead he's being comforted by Arnheid. I'm sure that the mistress knows. And he says, all that Iron Fist stuff is a lie. He says that a Norseman can't be a coward and make it in this world. As he's just like, he's got his head in her lap and he's just like grabbing either side of her hips, like just steadying himself. It's a beautiful visual. It's beautiful. Like the scene is gorgeous. If it were a married couple, this would be a really beautiful, intimate moment. But here it's like Arnheid would rather be anywhere else. She'd rather that be Einar, right, sitting in her lap. But Vinland Saga is not going to let us have nice things. And he says, everyone expects me to be brave. But he's like, I'm not. Oh, that shot. I love that. God, the animation of this episode is freaking good. He says, no. Nobody suspects a great man like me would lie about it. So that's part of the thing. He's built up this reputation of being a good, honest man so that when you find out that everything about him being this Iron Fist is a lie, you don't see it coming because it's like, well, he's just this big, honest man. He wouldn't lie about that. I bet he paid them off to have their reputation spread. Because he knew that otherwise he wouldn't. It's so sad. And in that moment, he like presses up against her like he's about to cry. He's like, I'm afraid of Thorgil, my own son. Yeah, he's terrified of him. I'm afraid of war. I'm afraid of violence. We see the sister put like that boy, he got just whacked in the head and face. And her putting the cloth and crying on him. And she looks so gorgeous. God, Arnheid in that light. Like they animate the heck out of her. She's beautiful. And she says, being kind can't possibly be a bad thing. She's like, I know your pain. And I feel like she's being genuine there. Like she's like, no, I get it. Like I get it. It's hard being the nice person, But the thing of it being that kindness is not bad. She's like, no, at the end of the day, it's not. But, you know, you're just sadly in a society that glorifies it being a bad thing. You're the only one who'd say that to me. And we cut back and see Thorgil and all of them. You're the only one I can tell everything. And at that point, I was like, oh no. And then he's like, stay with me. Without you, my world is full of darkness. And I mentioned this in the reaction, but it reminds me of, without spoiling anything, it reminds me of a character in Attack on Titan who has a mistress. And in that series, the mistress, he has her for the exact same reason. He can't tell. He's like, I can only come to you with these things. My wife doesn't understand. I can come to you and talk to about this stuff. He reminds me of that, right? He reminds me of that character. And if y'all have watched Attack on Titan, you know exactly which character he reminds you of. And yeah, it's kind of the same deal. And in that story, things end awful for her. So, not looking forward to that. And he says, without you, my world is full of darkness. And she just looks like, and she says, and the look on her face is like, with you, my world is full of darkness. That's like, he's needing her to comfort him, and she like needs him to go away so she can have a life that she wants. Not good, Cotton. Not good. It's just not going to lead to good things. Nope. Not going to lead to good things. Not looking forward to that. So yeah, this episode though, the idea of that kid getting beat so that he doesn't steal again, so he learns his lesson. Snake being like, the one thing I can't stand are kids with sticky fingers. Like, oof. Like, just the idea is that trying to find that medium, right? Finding that middle ground is the hard part in this series. That's the hard thing, right? I feel like finding that middle ground, because on one hand, you have Kettle, who doesn't want to use any violence at all and doesn't want to fight anybody no matter what. Like, he practically has to be talked into beating this kid 10 times or 20 times, but he doesn't want to do anything at all. And that's not exactly like Thor's. I get that. But he's kind of like in that middle ground there. You have that one end of the spectrum. Then you have the other end of the spectrum that is kind of like Thorgil and Thorgil, that's kind of like, no, just battle. We live by blood and iron, and things will work out through violence. And it's like, okay. And then you have this kind of middle ground, and it's a spectrum, right? You have Thor's that seems to lean more towards Kettle's end. You have Askeladd that seems to lead more towards Thorgil's end. And then I would argue that I think what's happening is that Thorfinn is going to be set up to be in this middle ground. I think Thorfinn's going to be set up to be our middleman, because he will have known what that violence is like, what its cost is, and what it does. But he'll also know what it's like to see peace and friendship and the value of kindness. So I feel like Thorfinn, by the end of this series, is going to be that middle ground that we need in this story. But right now we're getting just this whole spectrum of how people handle the balance between peace and violence. Like, when is peace needed? When do you use violence? Are they able to coincide? That the plan that Peter puts forth is kind of that coinciding, being like, we're going to beat you because you did wrong, but then we're not going to kill you. We're going to let you have a chance to make money for your family. And that's the thing. So yeah, I thought this was a really good episode. I really liked it. I feel really bad for Einar and Arnheid. They're not going to have an easy battle at this point. But yeah. So I hope y'all enjoyed this reaction and discussion. If you would like to go ahead and see next week's video on Patreon for $5 a month, you can get to see the next week's episode a week early than everybody else on Patreon, and everybody else on YouTube, that is. Also, you get access to the Discord. Discord is just $1. If you just want to pay $1 and get on the Discord and talk about Vinland Saga, you can do that. And then I want to give a special shout out to our philanthropy tier, the special patrons that help out each month with giving just a little bit extra to help me pay for streaming services, manga, anime that I watch and read for this channel, and to help support me in doing what I love doing, which is talking to you all and creating ships in Vinland Saga. So special thanks this month to Dana, to Edgar, to Larry Manning, to Anime Annie, to The Truck, and to Kenny and Tyrone. Thank you all so much. Your support is deeply appreciated, and I send you all of my love. So, with that being said, I hope you all have a wonderful week. Please stay safe, take care, and I'll be back next week with 8's my lucky number, y'all. We'll just see how that goes down. So, I'll see y'all next week for more Vinland Saga.